professional fiduciary.
Yeah. So I think one thing we should mention is that this stuff is sort of new, that there didn't used to be a professional fiduciary designation, and I think part of it was, again, that a lot of this work was mostly done by banks, and then what happened with time is because it seemed like a lot of banks were abandoning certain areas and so forth, that a lot of these fiduciaries that had been working with the banks went on their own, and so then they sort of developed their own profession.
Right. That's a very good point, Mike. One of the key parts of this is that working as a trustee or a professional fiduciary is a very, very demanding job. And for the banks to be able to run that type of department, they need a lot of infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And if the banks have the infrastructure, you can bet your bottom dollar it's costing them a lot of money. They're going to look for a big return. Yes. And there isn't always a big return that the banks can make on this type of business. Mm-hmm. So that's why the banks have raised their minimums, their fees, but by the way, the banks do an excellent job in a mm-hmm. lot of cases. Mm-hmm. But as you say, there's been a spin-off of a lot of professional fiduciaries in terms of the history of the profession. Really within the last 10 to 15 years is when the profession has come to the forefront. The licensing legislation was passed as recently as 2006. Yes. And the licensing actually started on July the 1st of 2008. So as you point out, very, very recent.
Yeah, real recent, just like last year. All right. Well, when might a family want to have a bank or trust company as a conservator, trustee, or executor? And what's the difference between a professional fiduciary and a bank or trust company? So again, we can get maybe in a little more detail there.
Right. So you're certainly getting to some of the key issues. The banks have a tremendous advantage. They're part of the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. They're regulated. They have audit teams coming through federally, state, internal auditors, that type of thing. So if the families or the individuals are looking for a great deal of oversight and the control as to what the trustee or the conservator of the estate would be doing, then absolutely look at the bank trust companies. And again, they really do an excellent job. If there is any significant amount of litigation, family feuding, question about the identification of assets, and that type of thing, the banks will have a screening process, and at that point they will look at what's involved in taking over the assets, what the risks are, and that type of thing. So that's really why we're looking at a little bit more flexibility from a professional fiduciary compared to a bank trust company.
Right. And from what I've seen, an awful lot is continuity. For banks, at least there's a continuity in most cases of the entity that you're hoping for, although now with all the changes that we've seen with banks, even quite recently, being acquired and so forth, it doesn't feel quite as continuous. But the other has to do with the people. So for example, when I refer people to you, what I know is that they're going to have an individual that they look to, and that gives them a lot of feeling of security and comfort. And that's a real key aspect to me of you working with a professional fiduciary.
Right, and just to back you up on that point, Mike, with the corporation, with the bank trust company, you will have, you've named the bank, you haven't named an individual. So as you say, if one trust officer decides to leave the bank or go on maternity leave and not return, then there is that continuity within the bank. And even with the change of banks' names, as you're pointing out, a number of banks have changed their names quite recently. There will be somebody somewhere to deal with the trust and take care of paying the bills. But it may be a relocation between our local area here, it could go somewhere else within the state or out of state. But the continuity could be very, very important for the family. One of the things that, again, that I should point out, getting into some detail with the banks, they will oversee the hiring of the private caregivers and that sort of thing, but the banks, so far as I'm aware, will not take on what's called an advance directive to make medical decisions for the family member, for the beneficiary, for the conservatee. So that would be a key difference between a professional fiduciary and a bank trust company.
Yeah. So related to that, again, a concern in some of the people even that I've referred to you and some of the clients we have in common is that there is this care aspect. In other words, we quite often have seniors that we're dealing with, and they need that sort of oversight. And so you're not just looking at the finances, but you're also looking at the well-being and then looking in from time to time on these people and seeing how they're doing.
Right, and generally that will flow out of the financial ability of the person to be able to pay for care either within their own home or in a facility, but also as to decision making. If the elder is unable to make their own decisions, there may be no other family member close by, no other family member qualified, and a professional fiduciary in certain circumstances can be signed on to make that decision. That may extend to a court-appointed conservator, where they may have certain medical powers to enable them to make that decision, either for placement of the elder or medical treatment of the elder. That's a pretty scary area to get into.
Yeah, a very important one too. Okay, well, what are some of the key documents that a professional fiduciary implements?
Well, I'm, of course, here, as you know, having worked together for quite a number of years, going to defer to the attorneys for this, but you'd have a will, which everybody pretty much knows what a will is, but the manager of the will is the executor. So you're looking at what your will does. Do you leave everything to the children or the Humane Society? But who's going to manage that process? So the executor under a will is the key person in my book. You should have the will, but who's going to be the manager in terms of, under a will, it would be an executor. Under a trust, many people have a revocable living trust, husband and wife. That's fantastic. They're the trustees are the manager. So when the husband and wife either become ill or pass away, then who's going to be the successor trustee? That's the question that we're looking at today between another family member, the bank, or the professional fiduciary. Power of attorney, which would be used to manage financial assets. Could be banking, could be a brokerage account, could be a safe deposit box, any number of things. The key person under a power of attorney is the agent that's named in the power of attorney. So again, you're looking at, who's going to be in the role of manager for that particular document. On the medical side, there is this thing called an advance directive, and again, I'll leave it to the attorneys to get into detail, but that is the person that you would name in the document to make the medical decisions for you if you're unable to do that. So again, who's going to be your agent under the advance directive? That gets to be very, very important because the person should understand your final wishes, if you are interested in life-supporting measures, or if you want people to, as they call it, pull the plug. So critical document.
Oh, yes.
And the final issue, which involves a lot of court activity, is a conservatorship. That's somebody where somebody is unable to deal with their own affairs. They don't have an appropriate trustee. They don't have an appropriate person named under a power of attorney, and therefore somebody would petition the court. It could be somebody from Adult Protective Services. It could be a neighbor. It could be a family member would petition the court to have the elder declared incapacitated and name a conservator to deal with that person's financial affairs, which is called a conservatorship of the estate, or the personal medical care type of things, which would be a conservatorship of the person.
Right. Okay. So how can a professional fiduciary help an individual with failing health or the family of that individual? So you've got an elder person again, they're declining. How does a professional fiduciary help out here? And sort of a reiteration, I guess, of some of the stuff we talked about.
Right, and it's a question that I get with a great number of people who come into my office and say, well, Richard, what do you really do? And what we really do is that we deal with the banking, the deposits and paying the bills and that type of thing. We make sure that the person's filed their income tax returns, hopefully in conjunction with a CPA. We deal with their real estate holdings, that may be their apartment they're living in, maybe their primary residence, could be rental properties. We make sure that their brokerage account is correctly aligned, they have access to it, the funds are available, that type of thing. So really, to be blunt with you, it's a takeover.
Yeah,
And hopefully it's not a hostile takeover.
Right.